Hello, I'm Sam Breakgear and welcome to Brains Byte Back. This is the podcast where we look at everything to do with technology and how it impacts our brains, our psychology, and our society. So, from our chat with the Vice President of McAfee, Candice Worley, on one of our earlier episodes, to even our most recent episode discussing AI automation, we talk a lot about AI, which is understandable considering it's very prevalent in our lives. However, so far on the show, we have neglected to discuss quite possibly the most important issue surrounding AI: ethics. Fortunately, you've tuned into the right show because today we'll be discussing just that with a very intellectual man who teaches at a school you've definitely heard of. My guest today is a professor from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, who is teaching a new course at the legendary institute titled Safeguarding Our Humanity in the Age of AI, Professor Bernhardt Trout. And for our special feature, we have Tech This Out. This is where we look at predictions from the past to either laugh at how hilariously inaccurate they were, or kind of to be amazed at how incredibly accurate they are. And on today's episode, we're looking at one of my favorite philosophers of all time, Alan Watts, and his incredibly accurate predictions of what we can expect from technology in the future. Now remember, these predictions were from before his death in 1973. And they are still very, very applicable today. So we're going to check that out before our main
Check this out.
So if you don't know who Alan Watts is, he is a British philosopher who interpreted and generally made popular Eastern philosophy to a Western audience. So nowadays we talk about meditation or spiritualism and lots of aspects of Eastern culture, which 50 years ago would be somewhat unheard of. So Alan Watts was generally one of the first people to really make this popular and bring this from an academic standpoint into our Western world. So I'm going to play you these clips. And following each of these clips, I'm going to play you an example from the past couple of years which have highlighted just how accurate these predictions are. Now, bear in mind, Alan Watts died in 1973. I can't be certain of when these predictions were made exactly. However, we can be sure that it was before his death, obviously. So take a listen to these, and I hope you enjoy.
The computer into which data can be fed from the files of the insurance companies, the Internal Revenue Service, the police, the credit agencies, everything, so that in a matter of seconds, when an individual is identified, an enormous amount of information about him can be instantly known.
This is one of the largest data breaches in history. It happened at Equifax, the company that tracks all your credit cards and mortgages to determine your credit score. Half of all Americans potentially exposed their highly sensitive personal information now in the hands of hackers.
There's a little-known service from Amazon. It's suddenly in a great big spotlight. Amazon Recognition. What is it? A facial recognition tool that Amazon says can scan in real time. Company says the tool can determine a person's age, gender, mood, even if their identity, if they're in their database.
Let's suppose, too, that we begin increasingly to be able to manufacture the parts of the human body in very perfect kinds of plastic, so that when your heart goes wrong or your kidneys go wrong, the surgeon will simply replace them with a plastic reproduction.
Tonight's Health Watch, a little beyond incredible. Potential breakthrough in making organs in a lab.
Israeli researchers have printed a 3D heart, complete with muscle and blood vessels.
And perhaps they'll never be able to reproduce in plastic the brain, but they can at least put in there a radio device which will connect with a computer system of some kind, which will do the same job.
Purpose of Neuralink is to create a high bandwidth interface to the brain such that we can be symbiotic with AI.
You will, of course, be able to see solid three-dimensional images in color projected in a certain area, and you can walk around it. I haven't discovered yet whether you can kiss it.
Tupac Shakur, the hip-hop legend, literally appeared on stage last night performing his greatest hits thanks to hologram technology.
Let's start off the show. If you could introduce yourself and just give our listeners a little bit of background on who you are, what you do, and the interesting course that you're going to be, I suppose, blessing your students with coming up in October.
Absolutely. So I am a professor of chemical engineering here at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I do research and also teaching in chemical engineering. My research is on pharmaceuticals, including applications of artificial intelligence tools towards designing better pharmaceutical products, also processes, pharmaceutical manufacturing processes. But somewhat related to that, ever since I joined the faculty here at MIT in 1998, I've been very much interested in the social consequences of engineering, society, engineering, and ethics. And many years ago, I began a course here on ethics for engineers with colleagues who I've brought to MIT as lecturers who have PhDs in philosophy and whatnot. I don't have any formal degrees in ethics or philosophy, just in engineering. And I've been teaching that for a number of years, and we've incorporated artificial intelligence and computer aspects into the course. But then recently, because it's become more and more important, we've set up an AI version of the course, or maybe I should say more broadly, computer science AI version of the course. And specifically, what I'm going to teach in October, to circle back, Sam, to that specific question, is a course for professionals. It's a short course with a colleague in the computer science department, Professor Stephanie Jezelka. And we're going to teach a 2-day professional course to kind of expand what we've been doing for MIT students to professionals kind of worldwide.
Nice. I mean, like, as soon as I heard the course, I was sold. I wanted to have you on here because I think it's something that's just incredible. It seems like everyone's talking about AI, and yeah, for a variety of reasons, it seems like it's going to impact our lives in many ways. The last podcast I hosted was about AI and UBI and about how it's going to impact our workforce and what our world might look like when AI does everything and we all live off UBI if that ever becomes a reality. But yours, I think, is one of the most interesting because it's the most vital part of AI to understand is the ethics of it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this is something what you're exploring or what you're looking to explore, and what you're talking about is perhaps the most pressing part of AI and what we're going to face. I did see in your course, the description states that this course takes on an existential threat of AI by exploring what is most important about human life. This means redirecting our thinking from what is merely advantageous to what is genuinely good, from a blind belief in efficiency to considered understanding of what is best in human life. How do you draw the line between optimal efficiency and what is best for human life?
Well, in a certain sense, they're actually opposed to each other. So tend to think of efficiency as good, especially in my field. Engineering really focuses on efficiency. But do we really want optimal efficiency? I mean, clearly, if we're sitting in traffic in our vehicles being frustrated because things aren't moving quickly, we'd like it to be more efficient. But do we want everything to be more efficient? I mean, let's go to the extremes, and it's very kind of you to say such nice things about our course. And along those lines, and thanks for reading that quote, because what I found, as I said, we've been teaching with colleagues here ethics for engineers for some time, and it's been pretty broad. And what's been so fascinating about incorporating AI and really having, of course, focusing on the ethics of AI is that I found that AI gets down to the root, the foundations of what it means to be human just directly. And so circling back then to the question of optimal efficiency, We all have lots of emails in our inboxes and all kinds of things. We spend hours and hours a day on our computer. What if we could make it responses more efficient, and half the amount of time that we spent responding? Is that actually a good thing? Well, first of all, shouldn't we be thoughtful about our responses? I mean, we want to respond to friends, colleagues, as friends and colleagues, not just in an automated fashion like a machine would respond. And then let's go a step further. What if it would be more efficient if we were somehow melded to our computers? Our brain was wired, and these ideas have been around for decades, longer even. But does that really help us in the end? It may make us more efficient in performing computer optimizations, but is that going to make us better people? And is that what does it mean to be human? We start to talk about that even more. But that's at least an initial answer to this question, which is really a broad question you asked.
No, definitely. And it really resonates with me. One thing that my previous guest, Peter Scott, said, who's an ex-NASA engineer who was talking about AI, he said that one of his colleagues, one of the reasons why he enjoys studying AI is because the more he studies AI, the more he understands about himself and the human species, which was which took me by surprise, because it's not something that I necessarily would have associated with the studying of AI. But I also understand it resonates with me on a personal level when you talk about finding that line between efficiency and what's best for human life, because I consider myself someone that's a fairly energetic person. I'm quite industrious, so I'm constantly running around, constantly exercising, constantly working, constantly doing this and striving towards goals and striving to achieve things. I'm also very conscious of the fact that it sounds cheesy, but there's that quote where it says it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And I'm so focused on the destination all the time that I often forget it's the process of doing it which should be an enjoyable part. So I do understand finding that balance to some extent is a difficult one.
Thanks, Sam. I think that's well stated, and I think that gets to it, and that gets to the point, and we can go a step further. Well, let me actually just say one thing about what you said, because I think that, another way of saying it is we want to be happy. We want to be happy in what we're doing. Well, happiness is a goal in a sense, but it's also a state. And so happiness doesn't necessarily correspond to efficiency. And then even a step further, we can think, well, what is most important in life? And we think about this perhaps from time to time, maybe some people more or less, but certainly things like friendship, love, these kind of things are essential, we would think, to our happiness. And none of these things have to do with efficiency, right? Friendship is not efficiency. It's about something beyond that. It's about shared happiness. It's not efficiency.
No, but it's what drives us. It's almost like our fuel, our energy to drive us to continue being. And then all the trying to strive to be efficient, I suppose, is in between all those sorts of things to allow us, I suppose. It's difficult. It's difficult to put into words. I suppose it's something uniquely human.
Well, there's a tension. So, that's part of human life, this kind of tension. But it is difficult because there's a tension. And exploring that tension is part of what's, I think what the ethics of engineering and the ethics of AI or computer science specifically leads us to. And I was intrigued at your comment about your previous guest. I didn't hear that podcast, but and you were surprised, and I was kind of surprised also. And I wonder if he meant something like what I said towards the beginning, which is that I found that trying to address ethical questions of artificial intelligence really leads us very quickly to foundational questions about what it means to be human. And I don't know if you had the same thought.
Yeah, actually, you saying that brought that to mind. That's what triggered that thought, and that's why I was like, wow, this is shockingly similar. But again, on the point of talking about being human, I guess I actually came across a quote of Francis Bacon, which you drew attention to, stating While the scientific enterprise will yield great benefits to humanity, it possesses a profound propensity to dehumanize us. In what way do you believe AI has the potential to dehumanize us?
Right, and just to be clear, that was my comment on the Bacon quote. But
all right, that was your comment, or yes. That wasn't Francis
Bacon?
No,
that wasn't Bacon. He's but,
my apologies.
No, that's good. Well, because and I think we see this today. We see this in schools and young people, MIT, for example, where I teach, but it's really across the world. I think we are very easily distracted. I mean, we all read maybe weekly about kids being addicted to computer programs, which is sort of the ultimate, or computer games, sorry, which is sort of the ultimate in distraction. And then there's a whole range of that, but it's really a distraction. It can help us, but it can also prevent us, and it does prevent us from thinking about and exploring exactly the kind of questions that we've been discussing here in this podcast, what it means to be human. And so, in a certain sense, by distracting us from addressing these important and fundamental questions, in doing that itself, it tends to dehumanize us. We have to be careful. We see this in the universities. The amount of time students spend thinking about these important questions is just dissipating. It's almost becoming infinitesimally small. That's, I think, one aspect of it. But another aspect, too, is that something you alluded to, what happens when these computers essentially make decisions for us? And I think that was probably a subject that you wanted to cover too. But I don't want to segue too quickly. But that's another point too. We cede our own autonomy essentially to machines, to mathematical formulations that are processed at extraordinarily high speed. So that's another aspect.
No, definitely. That is something, like, you kind of segued on something that I did want to touch on, and we've already seen it actually play out already. It's like, as AI does take over a number of responsibilities, what will go, or who will be responsible, or what will happen to accountability if there is an error. Like, I wanted to draw upon like an example of, if, for example, AI was conducting surgery and something goes wrong, who's accountable then? Or, as in the case that we've already seen, if an autonomous vehicle runs someone over, who is accountable? What do you think will happen to accountability as we progress into a future where AI is responsible for an increasing number of roles?
Yeah, so I actually, and I'm certainly not a legal expert or anything like that. So perhaps there needs to be some legal reform. I'm sure there must be, or legal changes in light of autonomous machines that do these sort of things, surgery and automobiles. But I would think that, at least broadly speaking, there would be the same sort of liability as anything else, as these non-AI machines. Product liability, if a machine, I don't know, a lawnmower, for example, is dangerous and it injures the person using it, then I would think typically the company would be responsible. And these machines will be made by companies. So I would think there probably has to be changes to tort law and whatnot. But that would be my thought. Is there something kind of, I don't know, broader or something different than that you're seeing here, that from other machines and other approaches to liability?
No, it's something that comes up a lot, or I see a lot. As far as I'm aware, someone was hurt or even killed by an autonomous vehicle. I think it was when it was being tested in Arizona, and I'm not actually sure of the outcome of that case, but I think it's something that I've been contemplating more and more as the idea of truckers become automated. I can imagine when that happens, there'll be the potential for far more damage than just if a car malfunctions.
Right. So think about it this way. Likely these machines will make fewer mistakes than humans.
That I do not find hard to believe.
Right. So in the U.S., there's something like 30,000. I mean, I've read different statistics, but 30,000 deaths a year on the highway, which is maybe not large as a percentage, but it still seems to be a strikingly large number.
Certainly scary, yeah.
Well, yes, I don't know what that can, no one can know exactly what that can be reduced to, but one would think that with autonomous vehicles, once they work and have been established, that number could go down markedly. But you raise another question, and this is the brilliance, I think, of the subject and your choice of the subject, because it really gets down to what's fundamental. Let's remember, these machines are sort of sandwiched in the middle between human beings on either side. So human being programs them, yes, may not know exactly the consequence of that programming because of the highly nonlinear aspects. AI is just a highly complicated nonlinear mathematical formulation. And so but someone programs that. And you may not know exactly the consequences from the program, but at least the human being has made choices that go into it. And then there's on the other side, there's a human being who's affected by it, hopefully mainly positively. But so the machines are really in the middle. They can process incredibly quickly, much more quickly than a human brain can. I mean, vastly more quickly. But they're not making decisions per se like human beings. Humans start on one side and they're on the other side of it. These are just in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that the government is doing enough to regulate AI to ensure ethical outcomes? Or do you think that it's even possible for the government to monitor AI in this kind of paradigm or that kind of area ethically?
So I'm not in government and I don't know all that government does. So I can speak to that on a high level. Well, one thing that we expect government to do generally is to defend our borders, defend the citizens who are part of the country. And I think that AI and weaponry related to AI is extremely important. I know the government is doing a lot in that regard. Hopefully they're doing enough. But this includes attacks of computer systems on the one hand, all the way to AI weaponry specifically. As time goes on, weapons become more sophisticated and must be countered with other sophisticated weapons. So I know that the government is, whichever government that might be, but governments are working on that. U.S. definitely, and I do hope they're doing enough. But your question, I think, is broader than that. I think that let's say the regulatory framework is yet to be worked out, at least from what I've heard. I speak just as a citizen. I'm not involved with in government per se. And I think your question is excellent, and it's really unclear what role or to what extent of a role government should play in regulation, even what it would mean. What kind of regulations would you want to have, and how can you determine whether those regulations are being followed? And hard to peer inside of a machine, perhaps.
Definitely. It's interesting you mentioned about the weaponization of AI. Because one thing that really resonated with me when I'm not sure if you heard this, but Elon Musk, he said that what he predicts will happen is that AI will be weaponized and it will be used by an army or military. And then something devastating will happen where there will be some kind of horrific event or horrific use of it, and there will be a global international outcry. And then following that, there will be a committee appointed to rectifying this or I suppose regulating this. That is obviously going to be a series of events which is quite specific and probably hard to carry out. But do you think that something like that is likely to happen in your opinion?
Yeah, I guess it's hard. It's hard to even qualitatively make predictions of such. Mr. Musk likes to do that and play up the threat and whatnot. So he likes to be very provocative. We all, of course, love him here at MIT, and there's a nice video of him talking about AI as the greatest existential threat at a talk he gave here at MIT. I don't know. I don't even know that I can say whether it's likely or not likely. I don't know if anyone knows exactly. I think, though, what I can say is that I think that AI-based weaponry is here to stay. It's going to get that much more. Going to become that much more prevalent. It's not going to be reversed because for the simple reason that, well, if AI-based weaponry makes one military more effective, then you've got to have it, you've got to develop it. And all indications are that it will. And, hopefully one thing that's interesting that I think your question brings up is that we tend to focus, we meaning, let's say, the public in general, society, tends to focus on kind of a given threat. And I guess it comes up from time to time. But, I'm growing up, I think you're younger than I probably. I'm 50. We're growing up, we were always worried about nuclear war through high school and whatnot. I mean, the Cold War and the end of the Soviet Union and whatnot didn't really abate that concern completely, particularly the possibility of terrorists getting nuclear weapons. But now we kind of have put that to the side and focus on threats of AI, among other things. So the human mind tends to focus on one major thing at a time. And we have to train ourselves. I mean, this is part of Bacon too, is train ourselves not to get focused on one particular.
No, definitely. And I think you're right. And also, I think naturally we just have this kind of romanticized kind of idea of post-apocalyptic worlds or kind of dystopias. And I think that is most clearly demonstrated in our love for like post-apocalyptic films, where there's always some end of the world event happening one way or another. And I think in our real lives, we're constantly fixating on what that could be. And I think right now, understandably, people are fixating that fear on AI, and I suppose we've been on it for a while since the invention of Terminator. So
I think that's right, exactly.
That's probably Skynet and all that haven't helped. But who knows? Yeah, maybe in 20 years we might be more worried about something else and thinking this is going to be the end of the world. But it seems okay for now, I guess. Like, as long as we're still here, we're still breathing, even though there are bombs in the world that could just destroy us all and wipe us all out. So we're still doing okay. So my last question that I really wanted to put to you, you've stated, well, at least I believe you've stated it, hopefully it's not Francis Bacon, you stated that AI will have the power to diagnose better than human doctors, or build houses better than human construction workers, and run the economy better than human economists. That was you, was it? Did you say that?
That was me, yes.
That was you.
That's
awesome.
Vision. Yeah.
How far away do you think we are from AI potentially running our economies?
Okay, and I want to make clear that this was not really a prediction, but a vision of something to think about. So in a certain sense, building houses is very different from making predictions on the economy, because I'll know that economists tend to be quantitative, but the economy doesn't seem to want to be responsive to their quantitative model. In a certain sense, it's interesting that you bring out that one of the three examples, because I think that's the one that's even less certain. And we talked earlier on about, there are things that we have to keep reminding ourselves that AI is really just a very complex method. The economy is, from all indications, not a mathematical formula. There are numbers and there's currency and there are all kinds of mathematical aspects to it, but it's not at the end of the day mathematical. And so I guess I would go out on a limb and say that I think that AI will be able to do a better job than economists in a number of things, but it will never replace human beings. And, well, it shouldn't. Let's say that. I don't know if it will. It shouldn't replace human inputs, human desires, human, let's say, differences in understanding what, different people strive for, different views of what's important. And so I don't think AI will be able to replace those. And so in a sense, I guess it won't ever be able to, or shouldn't. We shouldn't let it actually take over the economy. But it may take over the job of a lot of economists who punch numbers.
It's like you said, the reason why I picked that one is because it seems the most visionary out of the others. The diagnosis better than human doctors. I think I've already seen studies where that's already happening. For example, like even through voice, an AI can diagnose whether or not someone might have schizophrenia and then other illnesses which it can pick up on. And 3D printing has already done quite a good job, it seems, of creating houses. So that one was the one that really resonated with me, where I thought, like, wow, something as big as the economy, which is arguably one of, if not the biggest kind of components we have in our society, for AI to be like in control of that, that's a real symbol that like we really believe in this. And not only that, but it has proven itself to be a tool which truly is one of the strongest or one of our greatest creations potentially. But no, you're definitely right. It shouldn't in any way replace humans, but I think it could definitely be very influential in the decisions we make. Yeah, no, it's been very insightful.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, you're that's very good. You're right to pick that out. I think what I've seen, again, just as a layperson, I'm definitely not an economist, although I did take a few classes here when I was a student. But what I see is that often economists try to justify policies that they're advocates of because they're advocates, not because the numbers lead to them to prefer those policies. The number might inform them. But often I see economists using the numbers as justifications for something that they think should be pursued, like policy, economic policy that should be pursued independent of the numbers in a sense. So it's kind of what comes first, and they try to reverse the chicken versus the egg, let's say, in order to justify a policy that they want to pursue. And so that's why I think that in a sense, maybe the way to answer your question, which is right, definitely the right question, is, well, if we get to a point that as human beings, we see the running of the economy to machines, that will be a strong indication that we've given up a lot of our humanity and even understanding of what our humanity is, which probably is the same thing as giving it up.
I got to say, it's exciting times we live in, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing where AI takes us. But I also have to say that I'm incredibly jealous of all the students you're going to teach on this course, because I could talk about this for hours. But really, those are all my questions for now. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me on this show. If our listeners do want to learn more about you or follow you on social media, or even just maybe visit your website if you have one, how can our listeners stay in touch and stay in contact with you?
Absolutely. Well, it's very easy because I'm an academic. So I just have a website here at MIT. You can just do a search and you can find me and contact me. And otherwise, you can find out all about the course towards the end of October. And by the way, you're welcome to come up yourself. Absolutely. The course is open. So you can make it on October 24th and 25th. We'd love to have you if you can just pop by and sit in one of our sessions.
It sounds good.
At MIT.
I would absolutely love to. If I find myself in that corner of the world, then I'll take you up on that offer.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sam. It was a great pleasure and really enjoyed the conversation.
No worries. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much. That's our show. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can find all our shows on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and on Sociable.co. If you're a Spotify user, please follow us on there. If you're an iTunes user, you can find us on iTunes. And please, I'd love you forever, unconditionally, if you give us 5 stars. I'll even give you a shout out on one of our next episodes. And you can also find our podcast on a variety of other websites. You can check that out on our page at Sociable.co. Not only will you find all our episodes on the homepage, but also just below the podcast box, you can also find the little box where you enter your name and email, and you'll stay up to date with all our shows. And we'll also send you some great articles from the website, so stay tuned with that. As always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.